Hi everyone, this is Lev here from Influitive, and I'm here with Davin Wilfrid today. And we have a very special AdvocateHub class for you. Davin is the Advocate Marketing Manager at Intuit Quickbase, and he's got a whole presentation lined up about all the awesome things he's done with this AdvocateHub there, and in turn with his strategic change at the company.
All right, awesome. Thank you very much, Lev. I want to start by thanking the folks at Influitive, Truman and Lev, for inviting me to join this webinar today. I think it's a really great opportunity to share some of the stuff that we're doing at Intuit Quickbase, and also, hopefully learn from some of you folks out there in the Q&A at the end. So why don't we get started with just a little bit about Intuit Quickbase and who we are. So most people know Intuit as the makers of TurboTax and QuickBooks software. Most of Intuit is based in Mountain View, California. Our office is actually in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So we're kind of the East Coast outpost of Intuit. And we have a product called QuickBase, which is really an application platform as a service. Which basically means that people can build their own business applications like a CRM or an IT ticketing system or a sales management system or tracker, something like that, without having to do any code or waiting for IT to deliver apps back to you. So it's a really cool way for dummies like me to build business apps that help us get our work done. I've actually got a little screenshot on this slide here that is my QuickBase Heroes app that I built to help me manage our program. And I'll take you through a little bit more of that later on in the presentation. But one of the things that really separates us from the rest of Intuit is that we have about 5,600 customers, and a lot of them are in these sort of mid-market to enterprise businesses. You can see some of the logos that I just pulled randomly there, but Tesla, FedEx, Procter & Gamble, Dell, a lot of really large companies are customers of ours. Uber, a lot of technology companies are customers of ours. And that really makes us different from the rest of Intuit. And this is kind of important for this story because we're kind of taking a different approach than the rest of Intuit does in how we sell our product. So obviously we have an Advocate Hub through Influitive. It's called QuickBase Heroes. And we launched in January of 2015. It took us, right around 3 months to do the initial ramp up, working with our onboarding coach at Influitive, Selena. And so launched January 13th. As of now, we have 389 advocates, and they've completed about 9,000 challenges, a couple hundred referrals. I'll talk more about that a little bit later, but that's not even really a point of emphasis for us, but we're happy to have, referrals being made on our behalf. And on average, month to month, we have, between a 50 and like 75, 77% retention rate. So we do have a really passionate core of customers. A lot of our customers have been with us for 5 or 7 or even 10 years. And they already feel very invested in our software product. So it's a really good opportunity to convert people into advocates and doing advocate activities. So from the time of launch, our program goals were really, I mentioned that referrals weren't really a point of emphasis at the moment. Our program goals were really around driving content. Customer stories and videos was an area that we've historically been lacking in. So we wanted to get as many of those as possible. Word of mouth through online reviews for a product that was as old or as long in the tooth as ours. We did not have a whole lot of online reviews, so we wanted to drive that. And then just general customer engagement. With 3 million end users, we don't have a lot of scalable ways to make people or to get people invested in the future of the product and to give them an opportunity to get feedback and things like that. So we really saw the Advocate Hub as a great way of driving engagement. And then on the demand generation and product side, we support our social and blogging manager as well as our content from the QuickBase Heroes gets piped into our ongoing customer newsletters, things like that. And then we also support our product team through feedback, beta testers, things like that for product development purposes. So that's all kind of the backdrop to what we saw as a really interesting business challenge. So historically, we've had an approach that we call land and expand. And what that means is that people generally find Intuit Quickbase because they're looking for a certain point solution, typically like a project management solution or a CRM or a customer database solution. And they adopt QuickBase for that purpose, and then QuickBase sort of grows throughout the organization, and they build more and more apps. And eventually they get to this point where QuickBase has become a platform for developing brand new applications to support the entire business. So earlier this year, we did a really thorough research project to find out which of those customers are the ones that grow the most. How can we classify, or how do we get the persona of those companies that adopt QuickBase and then rapidly expand into these platforms? And through this in-depth research project, we were able to identify a new buyer type, a buyer type that we never really sold to before, which is essentially a leader either in the IT organization at these bigger companies or occasionally business process leaders like operations managers, chief operations officers, things like that. And those are typically those are people who become big advocates of QuickBase, but they're not people that we had sold to before. And all of this is kind of wrapped up into the evolution of cloud software, where you're starting to see more and more large companies trusting the cloud more and more for things like application development, to the degree to which the leading analyst firms like Forrester and Gartner have started to write about what they call the rise of rapid application development, which is essentially sort of a catch-all phrase for these application building platforms that require very little code. And so either an IT person or a business person can be driving these apps really quickly. And I mentioned the business person developing their own apps. There's a kind of industry term for that called citizen developers, which essentially refers to people who solve their own problems through technology. And we'll get into more of that later, but the conclusion we reached from this research project was that we really have a big opportunity to capitalize on an emerging market and go right out to that new buyer type that we had identified. But in order to do so, we would really need to change our strategy a little bit and add an additional go-to-market strategy on top of our land and expand strategy. So important to recognize that we're not replacing our existing sales strategy, we're just adding a new component to it. And so to reach especially IT buyers directly, we knew that we were going to have to roll out some new initiatives. Number one, a reference program, which we didn't need before because we had a free trial into the software, and people would try it for 30 days, and if they liked it, that was great, and if they didn't, they didn't. It wasn't really a reference selling opportunity. Number two is the AR and PR initiatives. We had done exactly 0 of that in the past. 3 was updating our messaging through our digital platforms, as well as our normal messaging through account managers and customer conversations and newsletters and all of that stuff. And then 4 was the social proof, the word of mouth. IT buyers are a different breed, and they want to hear from other IT buyers why they should even consider your product. So we had a huge challenge ahead of us, and we knew that on every single level, our customer advocates were going to have to play a role in supporting this new strategy going forward. So this whole thing is really kind of the story of how we were able to use our Advocate Hub to spur on our customer advocates to support these things. And our QuickBase Heroes really have come through for us so far. I'll start with the reference piece. So we'll go through each of those 4 bullet points one by one. The reference piece is interesting because, as I mentioned before, most people came to us and didn't require references. We get a couple, 1,000 leads per month through these free trials, and typically they're people who either build an app and get it and buy our product, or they're people who don't get it and don't buy our product. But it's been historically pretty rare that people ask for references. But now, when you go into an IT sale, it's a longer sales cycle. People might not want to do a free trial. They might want a demo and then have a bunch of conversations with salespeople. This is a whole different ballgame. So we knew we were going to have to build up our bench of reference customers. And there had been sort of informal reference customers in the past. Everybody kind of knew the 5 customers who everybody went to. But just kind of looking down the line, that's not going to be an option for us anymore. So we needed to build up that bench and create a system to which we're managing their activities. So step 1 was, very straightforward, creating a group within the Advocate Hub called the Reference Group, and then creating a challenge just asking people if they were interested in doing the reference group. And then you can't see it from here, but within that challenge, we also ask people to self-identify by industry and by company size and by their job role, so that we could, when it comes to the point where we're serving up references to prospects, that we're able to target as specifically as possible to get the best possible match that refracts what their company needs. And so you can see, we've gotten about 103 volunteers. That's a fairly deep reference bench. We've left them largely alone until now. But they're kind of hanging out there, and periodically when I do get a reference request, we'll go in there and find the right person and create a new Influitive challenge and have them actually complete that activity and reward them for it. The next step, this third bullet point here, is the most important one, and it's the one that's the least fully formed at the moment. But the real, it's the cornerstone of the reference management program is limiting or, at the very least making sure that your best references aren't getting overused. And that's the piece that we're working on right now. We've actually got a QuickBase app that is our CRM. It's very much like Salesforce, although it's not Salesforce. And we have all of our references tagged, and we have reference activities tables. And so we'll be able to impose limitations on reference requests and actually do all the routing and everything. It's not completely built out right now, but overall, once we get the technology underpinnings finalized there, we'll be able to move references away from the black market, just normal sales trading, and into the advocate marketing program. So let's talk about AR and PR, analyst relations and public relations. So these are both areas that we had zero presence in up until about 6 months ago. So we're completely starting from scratch. So we had, similar to references, we had no go-to customers for AR or for PR. So the first thing we did, we'll talk mostly about PR here because AR is kind of similar and but not quite as fun and interesting as PR. But so step one was to create, very similarly to the reference challenge, we created a group that I called Media Stars. We actually have a badge associated with this group, so anyone who raises their hand gets a little Media Star badge. And you can see we've got about 60 customers. All we did was ask them a simple question. It's a really low-hanging fruit 25-point challenge. Hey, would you ever talk to the media about QuickBase? And it spells out inside the challenge that we're not putting you in touch with a reporter tomorrow. We're not going to give anyone your phone number. This is really going to be on a case-by-case basis. We just want to have a bench of people that we can reach out to if we do have reporters who are interested in covering QuickBase or covering customer stories or whatever it is. So that was step one. Step number two was really to get a little bit strategic about what we can do. We got all these really enthusiastic customers, these big-time advocates in our program. How can we kind of get some attention-grabbing headlines out of this? So what we do is every 2 weeks, I have a meeting with our internal PR person, which was a new hire as of June, and we also have a PR agency. And we sit there and we go through all the recent use cases that we know about, either through the QuickBase Heroes program or through customer stories or the account managers and things like that. So we kind of mine the advocates for their content or PR ideas. But we also do these kind of larger content initiatives. So there was a project that we worked on right around the time of our Empower 2015 conference. You see that purple logo there. That was actually our first ever user group. We had that in Chicago in May. We got about 400 or so customers. So between that 400 customers and the 300 and such advocates that we had at the time, we essentially just created a really quick survey that one of the guys on our product marketing team had come up with to kind of define this citizen developer, we call it the Citizen Developer Index or the State of Citizen Development Report. I mentioned earlier that citizen developers was part of this rapid application development concept, and it's a really good sort of attention getter for analyst relations and public relations. So what we did was we created an Influitive challenge. You can see that we gave away an Apple Watch, which at the time was kind of brand new. I think it had just gone on the market. And we asked people through the Advocate Hub and then also on-site attendees at our conference to take these surveys. And we got, I think, about 400 to 500 survey responses, And from those survey responses, we were able to actually create this State of Citizen Development report. And where that fits into PR is that we were able to then take that report, shop it around to a bunch of media outlets. This is our internal and external PR teams. And within the first 2 weeks, we were able to get a ton of coverage. These are all of these links here are to Citizen Developer Index reports that we were able to generate just by tapping into our advocate base and asking them some targeted questions to help us get to those headlines. So, right off the bat, our first ever PR initiative, we think it went fantastic. Another success story in PR, there's nothing better than coverage, or if there's one thing better than coverage, it's more coverage. We were able to tap into one of our biggest advocates, who's actually a pretty small business. He's a guy who runs a bakery. He has about 4 employees, and he is supplying, I forget exactly how many, so I don't want to misstate it, but many of the luxury hotels in Florida use his bakery products. And the way he's able to scale his business to the operational capacity to serve his customers' needs using our software is really incredible. And so we thought this was a great pitch. We reached out to a reporter from Information Week. He absolutely loved it and just jumped right on it. And this was all stuff, we had an Influitive challenge to reward this advocate for participating in this PR initiative. He was interviewed by the reporter. A couple days later, the story comes out. It's really flattering to the customer, makes him a stronger advocate, and it makes us look great. So then you get to step 5, which is really amplification. So anytime that I think of doing anything with our Advocate Hub, I always think about it in 2 ways. What can we get out of our advocates, but also how can they help us push this story around or push these efforts around? And so we every time we have a new piece of news coverage, we create a new challenge that says, hey, share this. So a lot of these challenges are straight up social media. Please share this to your Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. Or they are things very specific like, hey, retweet this ZDNet tweet about citizen developers that leads back to our story. So you get a little bit somewhat sophisticated in how you set up these things in order to not bore your advocates with doing the same kinds of challenges over and over and over again. So it's been really successful so far, 140 completions, which for our customer base, honestly, is very good because they're not particularly social media people. Most of them are kind of ops or IT folks who work in the background and aren't necessarily out there all the time. So we're really happy with those results also. So the next bullet point here is really around updating our messaging. The way we talk about our product has changed, and we rolled out this new messaging paradigm at our Empower 2015 event, as I mentioned in May. And there's really 4 pillars of it. One is digital transformation, citizen development, I've mentioned a couple times, innovation by integration, which is all about connecting different cloud apps, and democratization of IT, which is all about spreading the wealth and spreading the responsibility for IT among all these different companies. And the cornerstone of our keynote presentation in which we launched this new messaging really featured 4 different customer stories. Each of them are advocates. They're all in our Advocate Hub. We have videos to support their customer stories. But each of those was kind of pegged to one of those bullet points. So that while we were giving this keynote presentation, people were really feeling the validity of it through customer advocates. So that in itself was nice, but then here's where it gets really cool. So as we went through the conference on site and in the weeks afterward, we did a lot of work inside the Advocate Hub to socialize these concepts, both by linking people to blog posts, so there's purely educational challenges so people could read more about what QuickBase was doing, why we think this is the future, why we're working on the things we're doing. We had a separate product keynote, which was about what kinds of technology enhancements. We're going into future versions of the product to meet with our vision, and really getting people acclimated to those 4 pillars of the messaging about innovation and customer or citizen developers and things like that. And the entire purpose of this was really to take the messaging responsibility for getting the message out and give some of that responsibility to our most vocal customers without doing it directly, without being too on the nose and giving them challenges saying, hey, go out there and tell the world you're a citizen developer. We just wanted to surround them with this messaging. And we knew that the people inside of the Advocate Hub were the best people to surround with this because they were also the most likely people to go out and share their story on review sites and other platforms. So, which leads into this final bullet point here about word of mouth and social proof. I mentioned before that IT buyers in particular, they do a ton of investigating now. This is one of the main reasons why Advocate Hub has done so well and why customer advocacy is such a hot area inside of marketing, right? Is because IT buyers in particular, they do tons of research before they ever talk to a salesperson. And they want to hear from other people just like them about why they chose the platforms that they chose. And so we needed to build our legitimacy with an entirely new group of buyers. So we needed a complete refresh of our review site strategy. It wasn't about just pushing a bunch of reviews to these sites. In some of these cases, it was about working with the review sites to make sure that QuickBase was placed where it should be placed. And our top case study here is G2 Crowd. So G2 Crowd is one of the sites that was on our list. We had a couple of nice reviews on there. I think we had like 7 or 8. But we really wanted to push into there because we knew it was a popular review site for IT people in particular. Now the problem was, as you can see in that screenshot, when you looked up QuickBase before, we were placed in the project management software category on G2 Crowd, which is a popular way for people to find QuickBase, but did not reflect our new messaging and our new branding as a platform for building apps and something that an IT buyer should consider. And matching QuickBase up against Jira or Rike or Basecamp really put us, I don't remember what our ranking was, but it was pretty low. Those other software systems have tons of great rankings. They're purpose-built for project management. There's almost no way that we could compete with them. So what we did, we took a couple of steps to try to figure out this problem. Step number 1 was a very straightforward 500-point give us a review on G2 Crowd challenge on Influitive. So we launched this back in July. So it was within 6 or 8 weeks of our conference, we said, hey, just go give us a review on G2 Crowd, help other people find QuickBase. And what you see, first of all, you see 26 completed, so we were able to get our total review number up over 30 from 7 or 8 or whatever it was. But the other really cool thing that we started to see, which goes back to our messaging changes, is that when people were leaving their reviews, they were saying things like, I'm a citizen developer. QuickBase allows us to be citizen developers. Excellent product for rapid business application development. This was completely organic. We didn't ask people to use those messages. We didn't ask people to say anything in particular to G2 Crowd. This was just something that people went off and did on their own, partly because I think this crew of advocates was really surrounded by the messaging that we had put out through our Advocate Hub. So in the end, we reached out to G2 Crowd and we said, hey, we love G2 Crowd and we want to play a role on your site, but we think you've got us in the wrong category. We're not really a project management software application. We're really a platform for building apps. And we also noticed that you don't have a spot here. They had a platform as a service category, but that also included huge development suites like Google App Engine and Microsoft Azure and things that are much more technical for technical app building platforms, whereas we fit into this real low-code application platform building system. And so essentially what we were able to do is take those reviews that our customers left for us and go to G2 Crowd with a real proof point and say, hey, listen, There's this other category here called rapid application development. Forrester's writing about it, Gartner's writing about it, and these are our competitors. We told G2 Crowd who our competitors were, and we said we should all be in the same category together. And our competitors include Appian and Zoho Creator and Salesforce One. And eventually G2 Crowd agreed with us. They did a lot of research on their own. We had a lot of back and forth with them. They said, you know what, you're completely right. This is a whole different category of software. And they created this brand new category of software, and they put us alongside of our competitors where we should be. And what you see right there is that we are the #1 platform that shows up when you go into that category. So if there are IT buyers there that say, oh, I've heard about this rapid application development thing, I'm going to go to G2 Crowd. They click on that category, and boom, Intuit Quickbase is right there at the top. So this, we consider this a really big win. It's just one review site, but it's a good one to work with, and we were able to actually use our advocates to generate messaging that helped us convince this review site to create a category, which we now are on top of. So it's a really, really positive result there. So some other advocacy initiatives that we're looking into right now. So referrals, obviously I mentioned at the beginning, referrals have not been a priority. Essentially, we didn't even really have a system for dealing with referrals before because 100% of our customers came to us through free trials. So right now we're working on our system. We have mechanisms in place. It's not completely automated to the degree that I would like it to be, but I'm working with our marketing and sales operations folks as well as our business operations to create those systems to where we can actually encourage referrals, scoop up the referrals, call the referrals right away, and then advance people through their AdvocateHub stages. Beta testers is a big one. The product team is really happy with the results that we've been able to get so far. We've done a ton of, the UX team does a lot of usability tests. The product team does a lot of kind of really quick surveys and things like that to find out what kinds of features they should consider adding or how people think about certain terminology. And then finally, feature councils. So this is kind of like an advisory board, except specifically focused on the product itself. And that's an initiative that's launching right now, and we're using Influitive to recruit some of those feature council members to hop in there and meet twice a year and help our product team figure out which features we need to add to our roadmap. So that's kind of the forward-looking stuff. I mentioned before that I actually built an application inside of QuickBase to help me manage the AdvocateHub or the Advocate program, including the AdvocateHub. So you can see a screenshot of it there. So I track all of my goals and KPIs. I maybe should have pixelated some of those things, but I don't care. You guys can see those. But so we track all of our challenges, our nominations, referrals, all of those things, KPIs, monthly KPIs. Track them all in one place so that we can very quickly and easily do reporting to the degree that we would need to do to keep the momentum going inside of the entire Advocate program. And it includes customer stories and videos and things like that exist partly outside of the AdvocateHub. I've also got a bunch of Zapier connections. This is just something I wanted to throw out there for anyone else who wants their systems to work together. I use Zapier a ton for things like when I create surveys or something like that. If I don't want to do the survey just using Influitive questions, it'll just be a link to complete an action online to like a type form or something like that, and then I create Zapier Zap so that when people answer the surveys, those responses go right into my QuickBase app, which actually stores product feedback or whatever kind of feedback we're looking for, and then also notifies the correct person on the product team that 5 more people have answered this survey and things like that. So I don't know how many of you guys are using Zapier, but I think it's a great way to automate anything that you can automate in order to keep all your various cloud systems working together. And Influitive works really nicely with Zapier, so that's great. So one example of this, customer awards. So as part of advocate marketing at QuickBase, I run our customer awards program. And the way this works is I have a customer awards landing page where people can nominate either themselves or somebody else. They fill out a form on that landing page. That data goes right into a QuickBase app where it collects all of the information, all of the reasons why this person should win this award, all of the awards categories and all that stuff is automatically zapped in there. Then there's automatically an email notification that goes out to me that says, hey, such and such nominated himself for an award. And then I can go back in. If that person is a member of the Advocate Hub, I can go back in and approve the challenge, which is probably what got them into the awards nomination form to begin with. So I like having loops be as closed as possible. I'm not smart enough to remember all the things I need to do. So I have to set up all of these connections and notifications and things like that just to keep everything going. So next steps for us, I mentioned the reference management program at the beginning, kind of formalizing that, both in terms of the technology and being able to track activities and assign references to prospects and things like that. That part I'm not so worried about, but there is going to be, I think, a fairly moderate-sized change management aspect to this on the sales side, because this is an entirely different way of selling, and we're going to need to wrestle references away from the black market and really drill down into the sales cycle and ensure that our salespeople are following the rules. So that's something it's a big ticket item for the next year. Automating referral tracking, I just mentioned. This is something that if you're using Salesforce is probably not an issue for you, because if you have an Advocate Hub and you have Salesforce, you can just automate all of those things. But I'm kind of working through that without Salesforce. But I see where it's going, and it's going to be fine, but we're just not there yet. Advisory boards, I mentioned our product feature council. I think eventually we're going to create a high-level advisory board with some of our largest customers. I think there's a large retailer in Arkansas that is our #1 customer, and I think they've got some folks who would be very interested in influencing the strategic direction of QuickBase, and some other folks as well. So, rolling out something that's a lot more of a traditional advisory council is something that's on my list. As well as in-product NPS. I think this is a huge upside for a platform like Influitive, where we could actually go into QuickBase, and while people are using the product, if we can target the right people and ask them at the right time, we can automate the process of collecting our Net Promoter surveys. Because right now we have a research firm who goes out twice a year and does this, and I think it's not necessarily the most efficient way of doing it. Okay, so I feel like I've exhausted my lungs, and so I'm kind of at the end there. So I guess we're going to open the floor to questions. Lev, did you have anything else to add before we do that?
Yeah, I guess before we get into questions people asked, I just wanted to personally thank you for coming on to this webinar and hosting it for us. I think you've done an amazing job with your Advocate Hub, with this presentation in general. I think there's a lot of parallels between the way you guys have kind of created and shifted into a new category and the way that Influitive has done so. And I think you've done an awesome job at that. So
thank you.
Again, thank you. And I was just thinking at the end there, why don't we take some questions from the actual community before we get into some of the chat questions here, just because they seemed to be around the same sort of theme. For example, Heidi Anderson, who's on the line here, asked how long it took you to ramp up the program. Was it an immediate success, or did you have to kind of do a lot of tweaking in the beginning?
Yeah, so we had a lot of success up front. The way we did our first batch of invites, once we had the Advocate Hub all set up, we did our first batch of invites through HubSpot, which is what we use for marketing automation. So we created an invite email with a join link to the starter group, and we sent it to 1,000 recipients. And those 1,000 recipients were made up of customers that were recommended personally by our account managers, as well as customers who had given us 9s and 10s on a Net Promoter survey. which I think was about 600 of those 1,000. So a lot of these folks were people that we knew already. Many of us had already had conversations with. Oh, and also another group was anyone who's ever done a case study with us. We invited them in. So they were really high yield targets, but of those first 1,000, 220 of them ended up joining. And so it was actually really nice because I had set up HubSpot to send out, an initial email and then 2 follow-up emails, and then I was going to do a second email 2 weeks later to a different group of 1,000 people, and did not need to send that second email. Actually, only sent 1 email and ended up with 220 advocates, which was more than our initial goal. Our initial goal was to get to 150 after 3 months. So we did really well right off the bat. And I think we're in a particular situation where we're, a lot of the folks who use our software have been using it for a long time and have been advocates on their own for a long time, and we're just kind of waiting for this opportunity. So I imagine the experience would be different if you're at a startup or if you have a much lower volume of customers than we have, but we were really happy at the outset. And then from there, we kind of we let things grow organically through referrals, letting people refer their colleagues into the Advocate Hub. We did a drive around the time of our Empower conference, where we used that as a mechanism to get more advocates into the hub. I think we added about 70 more at that point. And then just last month in September, we did a drive where we asked our advocates, I created an experience that was a drive to convince more people to join the Advocate Hub. So it was double points for referring others into the hub. And we asked them for program testimonials and things like that, which we then used on a landing page that I built in HubSpot to get new advocates into the system. But it's from my experience with our customer base, it's essentially just how fast you want to throttle it up. I imagine the more you get in your system, the harder it is to get new ones. But there are certainly mechanisms you can use to encourage others to submit nominations.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty, from my personal experience seeing kind of people send out an invitation, that's a pretty high response and join rate, and it seems like a lot of those people have stuck through till today, which is awesome. And I guess that kind of brings me to the other theme that seemed to pop up in the community was kind of how you maintain that engagement with, I guess, the existing initial batch of customers.
Yeah.
What was the strategy that?
Yeah. So what I would say is, and I can't remember if this was Selena, who's our onboarding coach in Influitive, or Stephanie, who is my ongoing Advocate Hub coach, but really impressed upon me, one of those two, really impressed upon us the need to go in and make sure that you're always studying what your advocates like the most, which types of challenges get the most engagement, and make sure that you're providing them with a diversity of challenges to do. It's the best way to keep them coming back. And being willing to be surprised by that, I think, was also pretty important for us, because what we found was a lot of our advocates, what they really wanted was QuickBase educational things. So anytime there was a blog post about how to do X, Y, and Z with QuickBase, people just eat that up. We had one of our technology partners created a blog post that was like the 5 best-kept secrets of QuickBase. It's like BuzzFeedy listicle kind of thing. But that challenge in itself got huge response. And so even though that was something that I was kind of surprised by, I thought people would be more interested in the sort of fun, goofy things or the community challenges, really kind of listening to your advocates and figuring out what they want the most of, and then being really judicious about how often you're spamming them with new opportunities for challenge, because it is pretty easy to be like, oh, anytime I create a new challenge, I'm just going to notify every single person that they've got this new challenge. But really kind of thinking about which kinds of challenges they like the most and limiting your notification to those types of challenges has really worked out well for us.
Cool, that makes sense. I guess I'll read one of the questions over here from Kara Clanton. She has asked a few things, but I think something that stands out to me because again, there's a parallel to Influitive, and I see that a lot of customers of ours ask the similar types of questions, which is kind of how did you gauge a benchmark, especially being new to this kind of AdvocateHub experience and in general moving into this new strategic direction. How did you set your goals, I guess, and how did you choose, both the actual specific metrics and the focus, and how you were connecting that to the AdvocateHub?
Yeah. So one thing is I was very fortunate to have a visionary executive sponsor for this. Our director of marketing, Karen Devine, really kind of got the value of where this could go very quickly, and so I think was a little bit lenient with my lack of definitive benchmarks. But really it goes back to what our initial program goals were. It was about driving content. It was about driving word of mouth. So I don't remember what the specific numbers were. I remember that our goal was to get to 150 advocates at 50% engagement over the first, I think it was 4 months. So from January through mid-April. And from there to also generate, there were metrics around the pipeline of opportunities for customer stories, because that was a high value priority, as well as references, as well as, I don't think we had referrals in there. There was one, the beta testers. So any kind of challenge related to helping the product team figure things out. We had metrics around those things. And so they were very much volumetric. None of them were really ROI focused, because I think everybody on this call probably realizes has the same opinion that this is really the kind of program that it's not going to pay off in a month. You might generate a couple of referrals and that's great, but the cumulative value of doing all of these advocacy activities, number one, is very difficult to measure, and number two, takes a while to materialize. So had I not had the executive sponsor that I did have, things may have gone down a lot differently, but we purposely chose benchmarks that would be the kind of platform for success for the future, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, of course it does. I mean, we have the same kind of mix between those two lines of kind of ROI-focused customers, as well as those who understand that this is kind of a platform to engage with your best customers and just build your relationship with them, and then give them the value that you can give them before you start kind of asking them for things in return.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I'd like to say my email address is right there on this final slide. If anyone wants to connect with me, I'm always happy to meet other people in advocate marketing, so feel free to reach out.
Awesome. And on that note, I was also going to say to everyone here, I'll be posting up the video that I get from this whole webinar into our community. And as you've probably seen, Davin's more than happy to respond and be socializing with everyone there. So I urge everyone to come over there about any questions, about just in general connecting with Davin and others around this topic. So thank you, Davin. Just wanted to, again, thank you so much for coming on, and thanks to everyone who came on the call. I hope you got some real value out of it. I'm sure, I know for sure that I did. So with that said, have a great day, everyone.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Davin. Thanks again.
Thank you, everybody.